riding down Highway 61. Sides of the roads all lined with fields, nothing but sunset in the windshield. Feel it as soon as I ride into town. This is where I go to slow down. Miles and miles of soybeans and corn. I'm in the place where the blues was born. About a mile from the big muddy river, place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away from being out in the sun all day. No matter where in the world I go, I'll always find home on the banks of that oxbow.
What's up, guys? Brad Chappell back with you at the Crappie Connection. We're in the cornfield fishing days, demo days.
Yeah.
And I've got a special guest with me today, but go ahead, Andrew, and do a little introduction of yourself and tell us all about yourself.
Well, thanks. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah.
Yep. So, Andrew Nordbye. I'm a professional bass fisherman and YouTuber, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And we put out a bunch of fishing videos. We fished the Major League Fishing Tackle Warehouse Invitational Circuit. It's my third year fishing full-time in that. And I fished the open professional level style tournaments, the FLW Costas, the MLF Toyotas for 6 years prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
Been married 7 years. We have twin 17-month-old babies at home.
Nice.
It's wild.
Sounds like it. Is this what you dreamed to become as a young man, a really young man?
Yeah. From the age of 3, I've said I wanted to be a professional bass fisherman. I got a note my grandma wrote and signed and dated when I was 4 years old. She said, Andrew said he wanted to be a professional bass fisherman. She signed and dated it. And she passed away when I was 9. So it's kind of a meaningful thing. And God's just always given me that passion and dream and desire to do it.
And you know, and I think I get people to ask me all the time, you know, how is it? And I know I'm blessed, number one. And then it's kind of like you'll never accomplish things unless you do it.
Yeah, you got to go for it.
Yeah. But, you know, you think of Andrew here, and I don't think of crappie. And, you know, you're thinking, well, you guys are on the Crappie Connection, and, you know, why do I have a bass guy here? And tell us, you know, what do you think about crappie fishing?
Yeah, so I grew up doing anything and everything fishing, and crappie was one of the main species we targeted and ate. We ate bass too. We ate about everything. We were the meat hunter, the meat bank fisherman.
Right.
But I grew up with a love for all species, and lived in Missouri, moved to Guntersville 6 years ago, but bought my first boat in college, so we didn't grow up with a boat. So I've learned a lot over the years. But the last few years at Guntersville, the crappie fishing in the wintertime's just been incredible. And I put out a ton of crappie fishing content since day one on YouTube. Ice fishing in Missouri, catch 100 crappie through the ice.
Nice.
And, I love chasing big old slabs.
Right.
Almost as much as the bass.
Well, I'm going to settle something real quick with you. Which tastes better to you?
Bluegill.
What?
Yeah.
Over a crappie?
Over a crappie, 100%.
We'll just say this is going to be
crappie
bass.
or bass?
Yeah.
I'll eat a crappie. Bass are just too thick. If you're wanting a thick bite.
Well, unless
like
you come to
crunch.
Mississippi for some of those big Mississippi slabs.
Yeah, I'd rather have the thin crappie.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, we might have to teach you a little episode on how to cook them better then or something. But
I have a secret recipe. We'll go head to head.
Well, we might talk about recipes then.
Okay.
We'll see what the bass fishermen thinking on how to cook crappie. We'll kind of compare some comments maybe for you guys out there. Even. So definitely appreciate your time today coming on here. And
Thank you.
I noticed last year
Brad.
you were here at this event too, but you seemed pretty busy last year.
Well, they wouldn't let me put my boat in the water. We were off limits for a bass tournament the following week.
Yeah.
And so I stayed in the parking lot while all 20, 30 of you guys were down at the dock with your boats doing the demo days for cornfield fishing gear, showing customers how your setups are, and I had to do it in the parking lot.
Well, how did that event turn out for you?
It was good. It was the best one I've ever had.
Well,
It was incredible. Got opened the door. We won Kentucky Lake last year, our first pro event.
Man.
First win in a pro event.
Well, how'd that happen? What was the scenario? Because, I mean, crappie fishermen, we love these details, and I always talk about details when it comes to
Yeah,
fishing.
I've noticed.
And you know, you'll hear similarities on details even on the bass side of things
Sure.
that correlate to crappie fishing. So kind of tell us some of the details. You know, probably no bass fisherman that's going, so you can let the cat out of the bag on this one, so you don't have to hold back.
Yeah, no, I've pretty much let it out, but the smallmouth were the targeted species of bass. As I went through practice, I caught some really good ones and just decided to go for those. I figured out they were actually spawning on stumps in 8 to 12 feet. And I think what I figured out that a lot of other anglers didn't is that the lake had come up 2-3 feet that week,
Right.
but they were already out there spawning. So people were looking in 6 to 9, and I was looking in 9 to 12 for those spawners on stumps. And I'd find the stumps. You wouldn't even hardly see the fish, and you throw your lure out there, and if this mic was the stump, they'd swim out of there and smoke it before it even got to the stump.
Yeah.
They were just hungry, defending that bed.
You
They
know
were
that
mad on it. That's what I did all week.
I've heard that same scenario work out for crappie fishermen, and I think even back when I fished a lot of tournaments with the crappie side of things, that you know if I found fish in a rise come, a lot of times they didn't go nowhere, especially
In a what?
in a rise.
Oh, a
Water
rise. Yeah.
Just the southern thing.
Rise scum? Is that what you
No,
said?
I said the rise in water.
Okay. I thought I heard rise scum. I was like, what is
No,
that
I'm
term
not.
now?
No, I'm not disking you guys. by no means.
Down in Mississippi. I didn't know.
It's just a southern slang probably got you. But, you know, I seen those fish stick to where they were.
Yeah.
And that sounds like what those bass did
Yeah,
for you.
they were locked on bed, so
Mm-hmm.
they had no reason to leave.
They were there for the business to be had.
But it can really push the fish away, you know, when the water rises
Mm-hmm.
and falls. But yeah, it didn't.
Well, I want to ask you, and we'll get some of the basics out of the way when it comes to the crappie versus bass to say, but you use live sonar a lot?
Yeah.
What are some of the common differences that you've seen bass versus crappie?
Sure. So some common differences when I'm fishing for bass versus when I'm fishing crappie are mainly how zoomed in I am. That's the biggest difference for me. Obviously location, where they set up's different sometimes, most of the time. But the zoom on the screen. When I'm bass fishing, I'm running 100 feet out, 110 feet out, 120 feet out, 90 feet out, and I keep it 30, 40 feet deep, even when I'm in 15 to 20 foot.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm in 10 foot, I'll shrink it down to 25 or 30 feet deep and still run 90, 100 feet out. Usually I'm 100 feet out and making long casts, catching these fish 40 to 60 feet out, about every one of them. Ledge fishing for bass out deep, shoot, I'm casting 120 feet and starting my drag at the end of that cast, letting line out so it sinks straight down. I'll set the hook that far out, and I'm using the scope more to just look at the line and the direction I need to cast so I hit my target. Crappie, I get right up on those suckers and zoom into 40 and just deep enough to see the bottom or see the bottom of the school and go to town.
Do you mainly cast to crappie when you're fishing for crappie?
Yeah, I hardly ever drop straight on crappie. I just enjoy casting to them. I use a 7.6 ACC and just cast to them.
What about like your pound setup and what is your preferred setup casting for crappie?
Yeah, I have it pretty dialed on Gunnersville. If any of y'all have seen any Lake Gunnersville crappie fishing videos on YouTube, I bet you've seen some that I've put out. We put out a ton. We do it for about 3 months out of the winter. We just crappie fish because it's so good.
Just wait, you'll become 100% one day, I'm sure.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, we'll see.
They'll school up by the thousands, though. And I have it pretty dialed, so normally I'm fishing in the current, so I spot lock. I have my cornfield live sweep turret and can just zoom right in on what I'm doing. But I have a little 100 spinning reel, lose speed spin usually, and I throw 10-pound braid on it, and then I have about a 20-foot leader of 6-pound P-line tactical, and that allows you to feel everything. Usually I'm fishing 25, 30 feet deep in the winter on these schools. They're all 1,000 black crappie sitting on one boulder.
Oh, goodness.
And you go to town on them. They're 12 to 14 inches, every one of them.
Now, I'm going to leave them a little deeper with this setup.
Okay.
You told us to line the reel and the pole.
Yeah.
What knot are you tying?
Alberto
knot.
Yeah, it's easy. It's so quick and easy. I wrap 5 down and 4 back.
5 down and 4 up, or do I have that backwards?
So you have the loop in the fluoro.
Yeah.
You go through the loop with the braid, and then you pinch it where you went through the loop. And I go 5 down, and I leave it kind of spaced out, and I go 4 back in between the 5 I just made, and go out the same way of that loop. Wet it. Never comes out.
What about to the jig head at that point?
Usually I loop knot it. A little double.
I was hoping I'm a loop knot guy to my jig head, so I was hoping you were going to say that. But
you can see how much of a crappie fisherman I am with these questions. Yep. Loop knot. I hardly ever throw any other knot.
What about
crappie?
Yeah. What about?
That's a good bass difference. I hardly ever tie a loop knot for bass, unless I'm really lightweight. Jig head fishing.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about the? And you said typically these fish in Guntersville is 20 to 30 foot. Is that?
Yeah, the crappie.
What
Shoot,
size
I got
jig
on a
heads?
couple schools in 35 to 40.
Just little specks on the screen, I'm sure.
No. There's 1,000 behind a brush pile.
Yeah.
It's cool. You can really see them. Go look on YouTube.
I will.
Yep.
I'd rather go look in person. Actually,
Come on down.
I think I
Come
will.
down first week of January.
Yeah, don't tempt me with a good time on crappie.
We put Andy from ACC on some big ones. Yeah. What
about size of jig heads? Is that a particular thing that you look into?
I never go above a 16th. There's a few different ways y'all do it. Y'all long pullers like to put like a ½ ounce up above the jig and stuff, but I just about 18 inches up the line, I'll tie me an overhand knot, and I'll put me a split shot. And the size split shot depends on how deep I'm going with it, but usually I'm throwing a 24th or a 16-ounce jig head.
Okay. So a split shot
that
up
gets
above
it down there a lot quicker when you're going deep and current, and
What about bait selection?
It's hard to beat. I like. Have you seen that Strike King salt and pepper? It's like a Bobby Garland kind of.
Just the color
That
range.
salt and pepper is about my favorite.
What about color-wise up there as far as the water? What does that water look like up there?
It's these crappie are finicky. My all-time favorite crappie jig is black and chartreuse with the tube style. Mm-hmm. That's my favorite. But now I can say I've probably caught more fish on that natural clear water bait.
Right.
But when the water murkies up, you still switch back and catch them. But Guntersville crappie are picky. The black ones. The white ones aren't as picky.
And I think of picky crappie, and I think of black crappie automatically.
Guaranteed.
It's just like
they get in a mood, and you might as well go leave, even if you're on 1,000.
And I'm gonna go back and. As far as that distance, what transducer, what is your setup in your boat?
Sure. So I have the folding mount, and I get the 16-inch screen up pretty close. And I have a live sweep turret with the 34 Garmin livescope 34 transducer on there, and that's about it. Spot lock, go to town.
Spot lock, go to town. Now I just love I see bass on the screen whenever I'm crappie fishing, and man, a lot of times they look like they're moving a lot to me.
Yeah,
maybe that's the time of year. I don't know.
They can. Usually when I think of catching bass on my live scope, I'm fishing structure, and they're staying put on that structure. But there are lakes, most lakes at certain times of the year when they are roaming and they're looking for bait balls and feeding, and they're floating suspended, then they're moving. You got to chase them. And it might take you 8 casts before you finally hit them. They're running pretty quick, especially spotted bass. I was on Smith Lake a couple weeks ago. I must have chased this group of 3, 400 yards. They're in 40-foot, cruising. And I'm throwing a 3/16 ounce minnow, little 3-inch.
Yeah.
You can get some big crappie to eat that.
Yeah.
Dale Hollow, there's some giants that smoke that. But they're cruising. It took me about 400 yards before I finally got a cast that hit them, because they'd be flying, and it'd take it count down 18 seconds for my bait to get down to where they could see it. But they kept changing direction. And you didn't know which way they were going to go. They'd be going straight for a while, and they'd just cut, angle that way, cut, angle that way, angle that way.
That's
and I finally hit him. I caught a 2.5 largie, or spot, caught a 2.5 spot.
It could have been crappie up there, because that sounds just like crappie, dude.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, it's similar.
You know, and I think about crappie, especially the more we've seen live scope and live sonar with crappie, is, you know, in my mind at least, and I'm sure everybody's different, but when I thought of fish swimming, you kind of think, well, kind of like we would. If we went down to this marina right now, we would walk straight.
Yeah.
And you tell me, what's the difference between what you see, how crappie swim versus bass? Or is it similar? Because crappie, they kind of do a side-to-side S motion, almost like a snake when they're swimming.
Yeah. The main difference for me is the shape. And I don't think crappie swim as fast. They stay put more for me. When I'm scoping bass and I see a crappie, I can tell it's a crappie because it's not traveling as fast as the bass is usually. But you can tell it's a little thinner, and it ghosts out from those big fins at the top and the bottom of the mark. You can tell it's a crappie. And bass normally are a little more put together, circular. It ghosts. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you'll see a big fish in that ghost image, and I heard somebody else refer to that this weekend already.
Just the fin part, yeah.
But sometimes it's almost like they get so straight.
Yeah, when they start going away from you, they disappear on you.
Yeah, you're like, that fish is there, but you can just see a barely little specks of it on your
little flicker.
Yeah.
The big bass will do that too, but I'm set a lot further out.
You know, crappie fishing, I'm starting out, especially for casting or searching for fish. I set mine at 100.
Okay.
And I run it down just very similar to how your bass setup is. And mainly what we fish for is white crappie.
Right.
And, you know, typically they're known to suspend more than I would say black crappie do.
Sure.
We don't have that schooling. I wish we did. Good Lord, I wish we had that wintertime schooling action. But
oh man, I know.
These big white crappie, and I'm talking, you know, those 2.5 to 3.5 pounders that we have.
Yeah.
Dude, they're running like that.
They're flying, huh?
So you might even eventually, depending on what lake you go to.
So I've only been to Grenada twice. That's my crappie extent in Mississippi.
Oh yeah, you got some more learning to do then.
Oh yeah.
You know, but they'll do the same thing. They will run from a boat.
Yeah.
Do you think the bass have changed any because of live sonar fishermen?
Yeah, they've gotten smarter. You bet. Yeah, they get educated quick. You get one shot at most of the bass, and if you don't hit them right on that first cast, they're not going to bite. They're done.
I think sounds crappie, man.
That's,
big crappie are the same way.
Sometimes you can trick those into biting, though.
I don't know about that.
No? Okay.
No.
Just one shot, huh?
One shot.
Now, you're fishing murkier water.
Yeah.
Do you reel it away from the crappie fast when they start chasing, or a little faster, or do you just steadily come up? Barely come up?
Barely coming up.
Yeah.
But if you ever hesitate,
They're
hesitation turns around and leaves.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're like, especially the big fish.
It's the same way with the schools of 1,000 on Gunnersville. Same way. if you drop it down to that school and you get one coming up out of the school and you lower that jig a half an inch, he's gone.
That's it. One mistake.
Yeah.
And they leave.
Yeah. So you can dead stick it, you can raise it, you can jig it and lift it up, but if you drop that thing, they're gone.
What about the summertime? Have you tried? Do they do anything similar on summertime in Gunnersville?
Yeah, they're not as big of groups. You get big groups in the summer in the grass, but I'm bass fishing. I'll see them on some main river stumps in groups of 10 to 20 big blacks. And then if you go up in the creek arms where there's not as much current and stuff, you can chase roaming white crappie. Not Roman crappie, but roaming crappie.
Right. Not Roman.
The white ones, not Roman.
Right.
Roman.
I did it.
Yeah.
What about tournaments wise? Have you ever thought about getting into the crappie tournaments?
I've fished 5.
Oh, have you?
5 crappie tournaments. Yep. They're fun. They're really fun. I got second in one. Fished a rodeo crappie tournament. You know what that is?
Yeah.
Where you catch your limit of 30.
No, I haven't.
Oh yeah, that was that on Weiss Lake.
Mm-hmm.
Rodeo tournaments in the winter every week. They tag every fish you catch, but your limit's 30. And
is it by weight?
We
there,
weighed in 43 pounds.
That's pretty good.
And we got 4th or 3rd. We got 3rd, but man, caught like 100 fish over 12 inches that day.
Man, it's
wild. That's one of the better days I've had. Black and chartreuse.
Black and chartreuse.
Yeah.
What would be a good tip for a beginner crappie fisherman that's coming from the bass side and they're thinking about doing some crappie fishing?
Yeah.
How do you say, all right, we know you're a good bass fisherman, but you're wanting to do some crappie fishing. How would you kind of say, hey, this is somewhat of the mindset, to kind of look for?
Right. Yeah, I'd just say finesse times 10. Yeah, it's probably helped me out in some of my bass fishing, being able to downsize and go a little slower, be a little trickier at times. But, yeah, that's what I would say.
Learn to finesse more.
Yeah.
And again.
Yeah.
Especially black crappie. Those jokers there can be very tricky.
They're so smart. This winter, they're the smartest I've ever seen them. I don't know if people are finding my schools on YouTube and wearing them out every day, because I'm not getting out there much with the twins anymore. But I'd get on them, and I could not get them to eat anything. I'd catch one out of a group of 200 to 1,000. The whole school would just be done. But I did figure out how to catch them a couple days, and they're pulling current. Normally I just float that jig right over their head with the current, slow, and barely raise it, and they come out of the school and smoke it. They wouldn't do it, but I did dead stick it in the current this year, sitting 15, 20 feet upriver and drifting that jig back and dead sticking it right above their head, pop it 1 inch and let it 1 inch up and hold it still, and I could limit out. But it was so hard to get your bait in that spot that light with that much current. But they ate it then. Do they
and I'm lucky and unlucky. I wish we had those big schools in the wintertime, because I've seen it twice as far as a really big school of crappie. But as far as like locating them, what is the tactic, or how do you go out there and you say, all right, they should be in big schools, which means that's less amount of water they're in the lake.
Right.
How do you go about finding those big schools of crappie out on the lake as the size of Gunnersville? Because it's a big lake.
Yeah, typically I'm just idling bluffs, and they're pretty easy to see.
As far as like side scan, down scan?
Both.
I
run it at the same time. Yeah. And I just sit 10 to 20 feet off the bluff, depending how steep the drop is, and graph till I find them. And I've had those same schools of crappie there every year for 5 years in a row.
Do they move up and down it at all, or they're pretty much
Sometimes, yeah. There's one bluff the schools will travel up and down at schools of 50 to 100 bigs, 14 to 16 inch blacks.
What's your personal best crappie?
Right around 280, I think. I've caught a few 16 inchers and a 16 and a half, but I just can't find that 3-pounder. I will.
Go west.
Yeah.
Go west.
Yeah.
Probably not a black. I think I've had one black crappie over 3.
That's a big one.
But, you know, a lot of those bigger frame fish have been all white crappie
Sure.
for me in my past. But, you know, we're glad that you like crappie fishing. I love to hear
Thank
these
you.
bass guys.
Oh, I love it.
Coming
What do you
over.
think based on your in-depth questions? Do I know what I'm doing?
Oh, yeah. I like I said, I like asking some of those details, and I
Yeah.
kind of fill out a person, and they say, well, you know, I use all 20-pound. You know what I'm saying?
I like 6-pound because I boat flip everything, just about.
Just about. You got
Just
a net,
about.
though, right?
I do have a net.
Okay, that's like good. You ever catch a 3-pounder, you might want to net him.
Yeah. Anything over 2 1/4 tends to get the net.
Well, how can people look you up and all?
Fishing with Nordbye on YouTube and A Nordbye on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We put out a ton of content every day on socials and a few times a week on YouTube. 1 to 3 videos a week on YouTube. We have over 1,000 episodes on YouTube.
You go.
1,100 full fishing episodes
Good Lord.
I've uploaded over the years. It's wild.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
How many
Those
minutes is
are
that total?
days of fishing. I don't know.
You didn't know you'd get these kind of questions either. huh?
We could pull up an analytic real quick. Just curious.
Yeah, now I got a curiosity going.
Yeah, let's look real quick. In the past year, well, if I have searched, there we go. Watch time. People have watched my videos for almost 400,000 hours in the past year.
That's crazy, isn't it?
That's wild. And that's hard to break down. 400,000 hours divided by 24 hours. That's 16,500 days. 45.5 years. That's how long that is.
Imagine
crazy.
if you could get like $20 an hour for that.
Right?
That'd be awesome, wouldn't it?
Yeah. No,
Well,
it's
definitely
wild.
appreciate it and coming on here today, and look forward. And hey, you might see, if you see a big Bobby Garland boat over here in Guntersville,
Yeah. Slide on over.
I might slide on over and try those big schools. Now I know where to
The
kind of
old
look
monkey
for.
milk catches them too.
Monkey milk's
You
always
betcha.
good, yeah.
Yeah, monkey milk and
I'm going to tell you a bait color to try over there.
that butter. What is it?
butter-
Butterbelly?
Butterbelly, yeah.
I love that one there.
Look for one called Blue Chrome.
Blue chrome, huh?
Blue Chrome. That sounds like it is a blue back with solid silver belly.
Okay.
That sounds like a black crappie would eat that over there to me.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to check that one out.
I appreciate it, brother. And,
I appreciate you having
make
me
sure
on.
you guys hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. Until next time, you got Brad Chappell here. Holla.
See ya.
About a mile from Big Muddy River, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I could